All right, my friends, here are four big stories for today. And the first is a follow-up on what happened yesterday with Merch. So you remember Merch came out and he made this whole big thing about how there are no longer any restrictions on the range of weapons delivered to Ukraine, either by the UK or France or the Germans. He even hinted that it was true of the Americans as well. And I showed you that clip. Okay, well, today, this just happened, Euromaidan Press. You see this. Ukraine weapons range limits is still in place, says the German vice chancellor, contradicting Merz. Okay, so this is Lars Klingbeil. Beil, I don't know how that exactly is. Anyway, refuted Chancellor Merz's remarks, saying Germany has not changed its policy. And if we look into Euromaidan Press, into the article, we see this. On 26 May, German Vice Chancellor Lars Klingbeil said that there is no new agreement on lifting range restrictions for German-supplied weapons to Ukraine. He goes on the issue of range. Let me just say there is no new agreement that goes beyond what his previous government did. Now, Merz, his move does not appear to have been coordinated with the vice chancellor, raising uncertainty over whether his statements reflect actual policy change or merely reference the use of weapons, Western missiles against Russian territory that have already been occurring since last fall. So we don't know exactly what that is. It looked like a big shift. NTV reported that Klingbeil's remarks followed a statement by Merz at the WDR Europa Forum 2025 in Berlin, where Merz declared that there were, quote, no longer any range restrictions, unquote, for weapons delivered to Ukraine, neither from Germany nor France nor the United Kingdom nor the United States. Later that afternoon, Merz posted on X, "We will do everything in our power to continue supporting Ukraine. This also means no more range restrictions on weapons we deliver. Ukraine can now also defend itself by striking military positions in Russia." So it seemed like something new, and maybe it is. It's hard to tell. According to NTV, Merz also claimed that the policy change was part of discussions held with French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk during their joint visit to Kyiv 2 weeks earlier. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a policy change that hasn't really actually materialized on paper yet. Well, we just don't know. This means that Ukraine can now also defend itself by attacking military positions in Russia, for example, said Merz. Until recently, Ukraine had not been able to do this, or only in a few exceptional cases, but now it can. Okay, so that's what it seems like has happened, that they've made some shift or some agreement, but I don't know that it's actually a written on paper kind of a shift. In a potential diplomatic backtrack, Berlin now says no new decision has been made. This is from the Kyiv Post, same thing. And at present, Germany has not publicly provided any long-range weapons to Ukraine. Merz said last week that future arms agreements with Kyiv would not be publicized. So we don't actually know if any extra weapons came. Like there was this comment by Jay in Kyiv. It seems that Ukraine's allies lifted restrictions on the range of Western weapons into Russian territory only because Ukraine no longer had those weapons. Biden-Sullivan de-escalation 101. Right? Now, maybe that's what's going on, but I don't know. It seems like there has been some kind of shift and the gloves are potentially coming off. We just don't know. We know it rattled the Russians enough. Maria Zakharova, Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Maria Zakharova warns Berlin is digging itself into a hole by lifting restrictions on how Ukraine can use German weapons. She claims the move won't change the course of the special military operation. Well, how exactly is Berlin digging itself into a hole? It seems like the hole is being dug for the Russians. Okay, in the next big story, the EU Council approves a $150 billion defense fund that includes Ukraine. So the EU Council has approved this creation of 150 billion euros as a fund for joint defense procurement. Ukraine can be allowed to participate. So it goes both ways too. The new instrument, called the Security and Defense Action for Europe, SAFE, is designed to fund urgent and large-scale investment in both European and Ukrainian defense industries. Ukraine will not only be able to join the procurement programs, but will also be able to sell its defense products to EU countries under this initiative. And Ukraine is going to become one of the world's leading arms providers because they have all this battle-tested tech and they've been just awesome at creating it. Planned purchases include ammunition and missiles, and air and missile defense systems, drones, including naval ones, and electronic warfare systems. So, yeah, that's a good step forward. The European Commission also is aiming to lower the Russian oil price cap from $60 a barrel as part of its 18th sanctions package, but it needs U.S. support to proceed. They were talking about like $45 a barrel or something like that, and the U.S. was the one in the way, blocking it. Like, come on. The proposal will be discussed at the G7 finance meeting in Canada amid uncertainty after Trump's call with Putin. Okay, now, while we're talking about that, that's going to have a terrible, deleterious effect on the Russian economy. Here, another sector of the Russian economy goes down, with 1 in 4 construction companies now facing bankruptcy, right? That's construction, and it's like thing after thing after thing with the Russian economy. I just talked about that with the seven red flags that no one can ignore. Yeah, now, if you haven't seen that video, please go watch that next. Okay, NATO's Secretary General fears that the alliance June summit may be disrupted due to the conflict between Trump and Zelensky. Okay, Trump just doesn't like Zelensky, and it's like the personality is more of the issue than even the country itself. Now, that's true for why he likes Putin. Two things could complicate the upcoming event. Trump's at odds with allies over the future of Ukraine, and Ukraine itself is seeking to join NATO, which the U.S. president opposes. Now, I think the best policy is to just try to start admitting them into NATO and admit every country you can to build as much pressure and just show, okay, the U.S. and Hungary are holding out until those administrations change, because as soon as those administrations change, boom, they can be in. Okay. Media. Leaked memo shows Trump-era U.S. pulled out of EU sanctions plan. Top European envoys warn of major risks if unity continues to collapse. So there's the U.S. and EU are have been working hand in hand on sanctions, and now that might change. The United States, as Anton Goroshenko, the United States and European Union have ended their joint efforts to combat Russia's circumvention of international sanctions. German media outlets report. The German Foreign Ministry internal report on the meeting of the EU Foreign Affairs Council held on 20 May in Brussels states that EU sanctions policy chief David O'Sullivan lamented the complete breakdown of transatlantic coordination on sanctions evasions. Quote, "There is no more joint information and advocacy work. G7 cooperation has also lost momentum in this regard. The problem is that the U.S. has been the de facto driving force behind the sanctions regime. If the Trump administration seeks to normalize relations with Russia, it will mean the end of global sanctions regime." Yeah, that's a problem. EU needs to really take that over and just run with it. Of course, as I say that, like, some people are going to criticize me in the comments and say, why are you hard on the EU? Trump should. Of course Trump should. No doubt Trump should. It doesn't look like he will, so the EU really has to step up in its place. Okay, next. Sanctions coming. Trump reverses course, according to the Kyiv Post, now considering tough new measures on Russia after brutal weekend attacks on Ukraine. I'm not so sure. Trump may lift, this is next, Trump may lift restrictions on Ukraine strikes inside Russia, according to the Kyiv Post. Donald Trump is seriously considering lifting all military restrictions previously imposed under President Biden, including the ban on Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory, according to the Kyiv Post. All previously imposed restrictions, regardless of their current status, are now being reviewed, as the president believes the current approach is not bringing Russia any closer to negotiations, someone told the outlet. I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, I like, the proof's going to be in the pudding here. It's not about what he is thinking about or what he might do, but what he actually does, and I don't think he's going to do it. Okay, or at least not anytime soon. Now, Ben Hodges posted this. It was a senior Republican speaks by Phillips O'Brien. This was a report that has been done before, back like a half a year ago and then a half a year before this. This was a senior Republican, close to many other Republicans, and he's like saying, okay, here's what Trump's probably thinking about tariffs. Here's what Trump's doing with the one big beautiful bill. Now, all that I left aside, just looking at Ukraine. Was there any chance This is a real significant insider who's worked with multiple presidents over the last 6 Republican presidents. Was there any chance that Trump would have imposed meaningful extra sanctions on Russia? He's asked. That's what he said. Trump will resist doing so for as long as possible. Why he takes this position is unclear, but it is one of the few issues that could cause a serious rift within the Republican Party, right? There is a lot of tension within the Republican Party about, like, Trump, what are you doing? Why are you looking like this? Why aren't you doing something about it? Perhaps he has longstanding business ties with Russian interests. Perhaps he views Russia as a more favorable partner than Ukraine. Or perhaps he believes Russia could be aligned with the U.S. against China, a view I don't share, but one he may hold. Regardless, Europe must now take the lead. It should strengthen its military posture and hit Russia hard with sanctions. This is the role Europe has long claimed to want. Now's the time to assume it. That said, sanctions alone won't suffice anymore. Chancellor Merz's decision over the weekend to authorize Ukraine to strike targets anywhere inside Russia using German weapons is a commendable step toward winning the war. Simultaneously, the West should pursue every possible method of lowering oil prices, opening new fields, increasing subsidies, pressuring Saudi Arabia to boost output, and the Saudis are starting to do that. Those tactics would do more to damage Russia's war effort than any sanctions package and are fastest way to end the war decisively. Wouldn't it be something if it was Saudi Arabia who won the war by driving oil prices down, where the US and EU just couldn't seem to bring themselves to do what they needed to do? What chance do you believe there is of that Trump will be willing to sell weapons to Ukraine? This would be a brilliant move by Trump, one that could bring the war to a swift and favorable conclusion while staying firmly within the MAGA framework. It would stimulate the U.S. economy, expand transatlantic defense trade, and reassert American influence. But so far, this insider says, so far there's no sign that Trump is considering this. That is disappointing and baffling. Can Europeans trust Trump to defend NATO members anymore? Listen carefully. I would not trust Trump to defend a NATO country if attacked by Russia. I could foresee a situation where Putin invades a part of a country, such as the Russian-speaking portions of Estonia, then dares Trump to commit U.S. troops to push out the Russian army. In that scenario, I do not believe Trump would support invoking Article 5 to justify a collective military response. That's frightening. I absolutely hate that I had to read that, but I'm trying to report what I see here. Imagine, Josh Rogan says, imagine if Biden hadn't forced Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back, Ukraine might not be in such a dire situation right now. Well, that's right. Trump is terrible, but we could have been done with this before Trump even got here. I mean, that's probable. That is probable had Biden armed them with what they needed. And then it goes even further before that. This war could have been prevented. Former NATO Commander Breedlove on the West failure after Crimea. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Philip Breedlove, said that the war in Ukraine could have been avoided 11 years ago if the West had taken decisive action after the annexation of Crimea. He made a statement in an interview with Radio NV, quote, "We proposed deploying forces, patrolling the skies, but everything was rejected as escalatory measures." That was during the Biden era, during the Obama era. Right? Before Trump won, before Biden, it was during Obama's administration. In the end, we did nothing, and Russia escalated anyway, he explained. So we don't want to escalate, and then Russia escalated anyway. So Biden didn't do it, Trump isn't doing it, and Obama certainly didn't do it either, and we still have the same results. Okay, Newt Gingrich. I point this out periodically, where I show you stuff like conservatives who are finally speaking up and saying something. Like, here's Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House during the Clinton administration, the Republican Speaker of the House. Putin will not be convinced by talk. He will have to be coerced economically and militarily, eliminating his ability to wage war. As long as he can wage war, he will. This is his legacy, and he recently pointed out Russia fought Sweden for 21 years. It wasn't him, but as one of his surrogates. He wants to conquer all of Ukraine and then push forward. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Finland are next on the list. The time to stop him is now, and the place is Ukraine. That's right. Now, I point that out because there are conservative voices. It just struck me. I wear this T-shirt my daughter bought me. I need ammunition, not a ride, right? Zelensky's famous phrase. But I just remembered this. See the DW on the back of the shirt? DW is Daily Wire. That's Ben Shapiro's outfit. Republicans early on in this war were actually like pro-supporting Ukraine, and then they kind of fizzle out, and the MAGA narrative like drowned it out. It's a really fascinating thing to watch. Okay, last thing before we're done. This is Anton Gerashenko. A French TV channel showed children marching in Russian-occupied Mariupol. School ceremonies there take place with soldiers and the Russian tricolor. The video report is titled, "I Want to Become an FSB Agent." Russification of the young generation is underway in Mariupol. Journalists showed the end of the year ceremony at one of the local schools where children stand for the Russian anthem and they carry a giant Russian tricolor flag. Soldiers also present at the ceremony, handing out diplomas to the children. It's a war crime. It's on a human scale. It's just awful. So they're trying to indoctrinate Ukrainian children to become Russian soldiers who will go into and slaughter other Ukrainians. That's where we are today. I'm sorry to have to report all that news, but that's where we are. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.